Good morning. Welcome to another fresh edition of your professional leadership television inside Nigeria. My name is Unipo, your host on the program. Of course, I hope you had a wonderful break. That's a Salah celebration. Of course, today is June 10, 2025. And of course, on this first segment of the show, we are looking at newspaper review, what the papers are saying. And like we normally do on the program, we like to flag up with leadership newspaper, Nigeria's most influential newspaper. Leadership's news story, cover story says, pressure mounts on coalitions to close ranks. Pressure mounts on coalitions to close ranks. The riders, no single party can defeat Tinubu as presidential candidate. As minister confirms SDP still in coalition talks. Key actors have agreed to work together, coming from the ADC chairman. These are riders to the leading story on today's Tuesday edition of Leadership newspaper. And beside that, NAF destroys terrorist training ground in Lake Chad. Gome raid Kwara community, raised down houses. Give deputies free hand, Sultan tells governors. Tinubu has ended herdsmen farmers crisis in southeast, coming from Umahi. The story runs on page 18 of Leadership. Tinubu has ended herdsmen farmers crisis in southeast, from the works minister. And on the cover of Leadership, we have a photo, and there is on the Executive Secretary, Federal Capital Development Authority, FCDA, Engineer Richard Yunana Dauda. Regional Manager Julius Berger, Nigeria PLC, Oliver Berger, FCT Minister Nyesom Wike, and others during a last-minute inspection of projects later for commissioning in Abuja yesterday. Of course, leadership's wrap around. We also have the invitation for the commissioning of the International Conference Center Abuja today, which has been undergoing rehabilitation over the months and is completed. So the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will be doing the commissioning today in Abuja. Still on leadership, Peter will be clueless on governance once power presidency. The story runs on page 6 of Leadership. Peter will be clueless on governance once power presidency. And on the business boss, we have $700 million CVFF, lack of indigenous shipbuilding capacity threatens disbursement. I'll take that again. $700 million CVFF, lack of indigenous shipbuilding capacity threatens disbursement. Let's take some snipers from that business story on the cover of Leadership. The planned disbursement of the $700 million cabotage vessel financing fund CVFF by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency NIMASA may hit a snag over one of the stringent guidelines in the Cabotage Act, Leadership can report. Leadership reports that the strict implementation of the cabotage regime says all vessels operating in the country's territorial waters must be owned by Nigerians, crewed by Nigerians, built in Nigeria, and maintained in Nigeria. But presently, Nigeria lacks the necessary capacity for shipbuilding. This means indigenous shipbuilding is a key requirement for participation in CVFF. Currently, the lack of ship maintenance facilities has resulted in massive financial losses, as reports indicate that between 2022 and June 2024, Nigeria lost 2 trillion naira, that is $1.25 billion, to foreign shipyards. Snipers from today's business story on the cover of Leadership. $700 million CVFF, lack of indigenous shipbuilding capacity threatens disbursement. That takes us to the stories about the masthead of Leadership. Mokwa flood, Bago pledges 1 billion naira to victims. Many still missing. The story continues on page 14 of Leadership. Mokwa flood, Bago, that is the governor of the state of Niger, pledges 1 billion naira to victims. Many still missing. Insecurity, 12 killed in Sokoto Plateau. The story is on page 15 of Leadership newspaper. From there, we move to the page 3 of the paper, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on Boko Haram informants among politicians, soldiers. Boko Haram informants among politicians, soldiers. Today's stand is the editorial, the view of the paper for today, Tuesday, June 10, 2025. And of course, like we did on that business story, we also take some excerpts from today's stand in leadership. Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum has once again drawn national attention to the resurgence of Boko Haram in the state. One of his most alarming and significant claims is that certain military officers and politicians are acting as informants and collaborators for the terrorist group. This revelation is not entirely new, but it remains insightful and deeply troubling. Former President Goodluck Jonathan has similarly acknowledged that members of the bloodthirsty sect had infiltrated his administration. Explaining his government's difficulties in combating the insurgency, he stated that Boko Haram operatives had embedded themselves within the three arms of government, including the armed forces, police, and other security agencies. Well, let's just move towards the conclusion of this stand. It says, yes, we recognize the danger of politically motivated accusations. That is why such disclosures must be followed by thorough and credible investigations backed by solid intelligence and forensic financial tracking. With the right international collaboration and political will, this is not only possible but imperative. Over the years, many Nigerians have called for the public naming of Boko Haram sponsors, but those calls have been ignored. From the shadows, these masters of terror have continued to orchestrate death and destruction across Nigeria. As a newspaper, we believe Nigeria could and should have stopped this evil long ago, but this is a good time to do so. These are excerpts from today's stand on Leadership newspaper this Monday, June 10, 2025. From our stand, we move to the back page of the paper where we have Tuesday column with Abdurrauf Aliyu. Today's back page is on Crown's crisis and the call to serve. Today's Tuesday column with Abdurrauf Aliyu, Crown's crisis and the call to serve. Let's take quote from that column. Nigeria's story has been told by those who break it, not those who bear it. Quote from today's column with Abdurrauf Aliyu, titled Crown's crisis and the call to serve. From there, we move to Ghana Must Go. Ghana Must Go is on David Umahi, the works minister. He says, after God, my loyalty lies with Tinubu. And Ghana Must Go replied, till he reshuffles cabinet. It's a question that has to wait until when Tinubu reshuffles his cabinet. It's on this note we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Tuesday, June 10, 2025. Don't forget to log into the website of Leadership for more stories. www.leadership.ng. From Leadership, we move to the next paper we have on our lineup this Tuesday, and let's see what the Punch newspaper is having on its cover. The Punch says, defections, Hurricane Tinubu sweeps 12 more senators, reps. Defections, Hurricane Tinubu sweeps 12 more senators, reps. APC cuts 4 PDP governors, 10 Akwa Ibom NAS members to join ENO. 2 Edo Nasarawa senators to quit SDP Labour Party. Kickers to the leading story on the Punch newspaper this Tuesday morning. Defections, Hurricane Tinubu sweeps 12 more senators, reps. And that takes us to the story, just stories beside the masthead of the Punch. He says, Obi sparks firestorm over Tinubu subsidy figures. Obi sparks firestorm over Tinubu subsidy figures. Tears joy as Nigerian pilgrims depart Saudi after Hajj. The story continues on page 26 of the Punch newspaper. It's on that note we conclude review of front headline stories on the Punch this morning. Don't forget to log into the website of the Punch for continuation of those headline stories. We move over to the Vanguard newspaper this Tuesday for review of their front headline story. The main story says presidency will be clash over fuel subsidy forest policies. Presidency will be clash over fuel subsidy forest policies. Ndume to Tinubu, 22 PDP governors endorsed Jonathan, but yet he lost woefully. Coming from Ndume, 22 PDP governors endorsed Jonathan, yet he lost woefully. From Senator Ndume. Is a lone wolf opposition, says presidency in response to that. And that also concludes review of front headline story on Vanguard. Most of the papers we have on our lineup today have a wraparound for the invitation of the commissioning of the newly rehabilitated International Conference Center Abuja this Tuesday. Moving ahead, we move to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian says 24 years later, 43 new operators target telcos underserved amid concerns. 24 years later, 43 new operators target telcos underserved amid concerns. The story continues on page 6 of The Guardian. Otedola to consolidate stake in First Bank as Otudeco Odukali consider exit. Wike rallies PDP stakeholders in Abuja high stakes meeting. OBOT Nenadi relaunch obedient movement in Abuja today. The story continues on page 5 of The Guardian newspaper. We actually have the picture of the governor of Abia State and Nenadi Usman beneath that story. OBOT Nenadi relaunch obedient movement in Abuja today. Still on The Guardian newspaper, subsidy Obi demands transparency on savings. Presidency calls him desperate. It's a story that was also gracing the cover, like you heard before. It is the story that is gracing the cover in all the papers we have on our lineup this morning. Still on The Guardian, 100,000 rickety containers dumped in Nigerian ports, group laments. 100,000 rickety containers dumped in Nigerian ports, group laments. Madam Abacha forced IBB's claim on June 12 election annulment. Miriam Abacha forced IBB's claim on June 12 election annulment. The story continues on page 9 of The Guardian newspaper. We are moving ahead to other papers we have on our lineup. And let's see what Nigerian Tribune has on its cover. This Tuesday, the Nigerian Tribune says Nigeria may stabilize around 1,600 and 1,650 naira in near term, coming from experts. And Miriam Abacha says Abacha didn't annul June 12 election, never stole money. Miriam defends late husband. Says money saved by Abacha vanished months after his death. The story runs on page 15 of Nigerian Tribune. Abacha didn't annul June 12 election, never stole money. Miriam defends late husband. Says money saved by Abacha vanished months after his death. With that, we also conclude review of front headline stories on today's Nigerian Tribune. Don't forget to log into the website of Nigerian Tribune for continuation of these stories. From Nigerian Tribune, we bring to a close the first half of today's program, Inside Nigeria. Stay tuned for the second half of the program. Don't go away.
Discover Turkey through education. The culture-rich country of Turkey, which has hosted a myriad of civilization throughout the centuries, is a global pioneer in education. Turkey offers various lucrative opportunities for students. Despite its quality living standards, the cost of living in Turkey is affordable compared to other European countries. A diploma from globally recognized and renowned universities in Turkey will open every door for you. For more information, visit leadership.ng/study in Turkey. Discover Turkey through education. The culture-rich country of Turkey, which has hosted a myriad of civilization throughout the centuries, is a global pioneer in education. Turkey offers various lucrative opportunities for students. Despite its quality living standards, the cost of living in Turkey is affordable compared to other European countries. A diploma from globally recognized and renowned universities in Turkey will open every door for you. For more information, visit leadership.ng/study in Turkey. Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.
Good morning once again and welcome to the program Inside Nigeria. We are on to the second half of the program where we'll shed more light on some trading issues. My name is Winifred Ubebo, once again your host on the program, and I have my Tuesday guest in the house, is the public affairs analyst Benedict Abunoye.
Good morning
and welcome to today's program. It's good to have you around. Well, we have some stories are making the covers today. Of course, one of such is the matriarch of Abacha family, talking about Miriam Abacha. His former to talked about the June 12 election, and she says Abacha didn't annul June 12 election, never stole money. She defends her late husband. Says money saved by Abacha vanished months after his death. It's also a story that is just gracing some of the papers we have on our lineup today, and which we read earlier in the first half of the program. So what is happening? June 12 is just 2 days away. How come the Miriam is speaking out now?
She has been on the low side. She's been a quiet person. Definitely for you to hear her, people must have gone to her to ask her opinion about events around the issue. And I think that to the best of everybody's knowledge, Abacha did not go to a station to announce annulment. Neither did even Omo Omoruyi said Abacha stopped me from announcing. No.
But you heard what happened during the launch of IBB's library, where in his book he actually opened some kind of worms and claiming that it was Abacha actually that
well,
moved,
not necessarily Abacha, a number of soldiers led by Abacha. If he's got that to say, that is his story against their story. I think some of the actors, particularly David Mark is still alive. So we can't say everybody is dead. Abacha might be dead. What's his name? Omo Omoruyi might be gone. The Omprinwosu might be gone. But at least the likes of David Mark are still alive. So if we want to know what transpired, I think people like David Mark should be the ones answering questions. In most cases, the wife is at home and doesn't even know what happens in the office except to the extent of what she's told. So if we are ready to pursue the truth, then we should go after those who were involved at the time who are still alive. Not secondary actors, not dependents, but the direct actors. And here I will put it strong. Number one should be David Mark, as of today, who should be talking about the events surrounding June 12.
Now, still on June 12th, it's just 2 days away, like I mentioned earlier. Now that you have the federal government has taken both steps, starting from the immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari, to immortalize the man. In recognition of the fact that he was actually victorious. Then what happened to other things that accrue to the man as the so-called president?
Well, to a large extent, if you have declared him, he won the election.
Exactly.
But was he actually sworn in as the president? Did he actually work or rule the nation? So if he has not, I think that we still need a lot will need to be done in the moral clinic as it is necessary. As we stand today, is Adamawa giving anything to Atiku as a governor-elect or as a former governor of the state? I don't think I've heard
But
that
he
happen
moved ahead to
anywhere.
become
It doesn't matter. He won the election as governor before he became the vice president. Even though he was declared validly to have won, he was never sworn in as the governor and had not been treated, therefore, as a former governor of the state. So I think that certain things in Truth and Reconciliation are done for the purpose of doing that. Now, to say you will pay him means that we would have to also sit down to agree that Abacha did not rule the nation. And so whatsoever accrued to whoever was in charge of the nation from 1993 to 1997 should be given to the MKO, to MKO. But where we have not sit down or have any law or rule to specifically define that, I think that
recently
it was just okay
in one of the events,
the
Lamido, the former governor of Jigawa State, actually made claim that federal government was owing MKO huge sum of money. Though I've forgotten the exact figure now. And what are your views?
Well, if you say they are owing, there should be evidence of transaction or responsibility that makes the owing done. And I think rather than people making statements that will make them popular, hand over the documents if they are with you to the children, let them go and pursue it. If the right authorities are not paying them, the court is there to take decision. I think that we should stop getting sentimental and just talking for talking's sake or attracting attention. A debt is a debt. So if it is established and you have the document to that respect, or you know where the children can get the document, advise them to go and pick it up and pursue the payment, not making outlandish statements here and there.
Well, before we leave the issue of June 12th, Miriam, still on Miriam, in one of the papers said $5.12 billion Abacha loot. He said, let anyone prove my husband's to Nigeria's money.
Well, the husband is not here. We also know that during his regime, he would always say, my government is a child of necessity. So clearly, there has been claim and counterclaims as to, because nobody will sell arm to us, because nobody will do this or that with us, then you needed to move out the money, maybe in individual's name or in private comfort, so that you possibly can use them to acquire things for the nation. And so, but to that extent, until there are bigger proofs, we might not be able to justify that. But of course, we saw that also in Jonathan regime, where people were talking about a pastor using his private jet to transport money for the government or for certain individuals to South Africa in the name of procuring arms. So in the face of international sanction, anything can happen. But until proven otherwise, what we knew is that this money were not properly taken out of the country. I think that's the only fact we are sure of. The money had moved. For what purpose, we don't know. For what reason, we have not established. But all we know is that they were public funds moved in a manner that is not within the compliance of the law, and for which purposes were not clearly stated.
All right, thank you so much. Now, moving away from June 12th, in Broglo, we talk telcos. The Guardian's leading story today says 24 years later, 43 new operators target telcos underserved amid concerns. And the story runs on page 6 of the Guardian. 24 years later, 43 new operators target telcos underserved amid concerns.
Obviously, we can say as we speak today that a lot of places, a lot of land gaps in Nigeria are still not covered. Even within the FCT, you have areas where the network are next to nothing. You have areas where they are not served at all. You have environments where people have moved to over time that were possibly not occupied 24 years ago when the GSM network arrived. So if there are people who are targeting the underserved, I think the government might even need to give them incentive to be able
But
to
how
get
come
that
the
done
major
and done
operators that we've
properly.
had all this while did not bother about the underside, and there was no matching, in quote, matching orders to that effect?
Well, practical reality you want to say is this: until there is, now take note, until there is an original, there cannot be
Counterfeit.
counterfeit. The fact that the major operators were here and they are serving some people is what gives you the opportunity to classify some area as being under served. And of course, when you go to the major telcos, for me, there has also been the problem of what you would call innovation. Their base station started on diesel, and several of their base stations are still running on diesel 24 years after. Why haven't we migrated to renewable? Why have they not looked at other less expensive technology? So if you have to install generator, you needed security, you needed to buy diesel and the rest of that, then you will want to look at what is the traction, what is the quantum of clients available in this environment, and how long does it take to recoup this investment. So where you do your cost benefit analysis, you will realize that there are places where even if you install, it may take forever, you will continue to incur losses. A nation like, I think, the UK addressed that by having the telcos all around, and of course you have the British Telecom still serving those on that served area. And when you come to their rail network, there is the national rail serving those areas that should be underserved. Why the areas that is commercial enough and can make profit are being served by other arrangements. So basically, it is that if we have not done a blue murder between the BPE and the Obasanjo administration, if Nitel had not been killed, for me it was blue murder. If that blue murder had not happened, perhaps Nitel would have been able to service those areas, and by now we would have had a better network integrity as a nation.
All right, thank you so much. Moving away from telcos, we talk politics now. Leadership's leading story today says pressure mounts on coalitions to close ranks, just as we have senators and representative members defecting to the ruling All Progressives Congress (APC). Nonetheless, the Senator Ndume says 22 PD governors endorsed Jonathan, yet he lost woefully. In other words, telling President Bola Ahmed Tinubu not to rejoice so soon. So what is happening?
Well, I think for me, Senator Ndume sounds more like an attention seeker. Yes, the governor in the state is running a second term. I don't think Borno South has ever produced governor. So perhaps he's eyeing the job of the governor, and so he thinks he needs to make himself available and make all the noise around here. But I'm sure he knows that governorship election in Borno will be won in Borno, not in the studio of any newspaper. To that extent, he is today a senator. And I want people to engage him more on how many bills has he sponsored as a senator? How many petitions of the underserved people in Borno South that he represents has he presented on the floor of the Senate? How well has he represented the people of Borno or the Northeast on the floor of the Senate? He's first and foremost a senator, and a ranking senator, for that matter, should be more focused on changing things from the Senate, not from banding public opinion. I think that's my position about him. And if you think that the people in the presidency today or around the president are there for their own self, I can also say that he is also in politics for his self-serving. So it becomes very easy for him to see people who are like him. So they are birds of the same feather. And that's why he can see them. So like we will say, let him first go back to the Senate, take up his responsibility as a senator, and do it diligently. And on his comment on Jonathan getting 22 governors backing him, I doubt if that statement is true. Because you will remember that Far back in 2013,
yes.
you've had the crack where the preferred candidate of the president couldn't even become the chairman of Governors Forum. The election ended, I think it was 16-19. Maybe one governor was absent. It was 16-19, 19 in favor of those of the opposition and the PDP people who were against the president, and then 16 in favor of the president's candidate. So we can effectively say that from 2013, what Jonathan had effectively was 16 governors, not 22. And towards the election, we knew that even though some of the governors were still in PDP, they were already against the president. So there was the new PDP, the NPDP as they are called. You have an wholesale defection from Kwara involving the governor and everybody. And that's why today it baffles me when you see a Saraki talking about Delta defection. That was what happened in Kwara when he was a senator and the governor was his loyalist. So these things do happen. And so rather than you making comparisons that are not exactly the same, he should, for me, Ndume should focus more on representing the people of Borno South who have put him there, and then go to Borno and contest if he wants to become the governor.
However, Benedict, is the response of the presidency to his claim that is so funny. They say he's a lone wolf opposition, but it's a member of the unruling, the ruling of Progressive Congress. Yeah, they are calling him opposition
because that's what he chose to be.
Belong to.
That's what he chose to be. That's what he chose to be. Because if he is actually a ranking senator and a member of the party, I think that his press statements will be guided, because he's not a PRO of the Senate, neither is he a PRO of the party. And so, like I said, he should be more focused on what are the projects that are abandoned in Borno, what are the things that should be done in Borno South that are not being done. That should be, for me, his focus than an outlandish bigger statement. If tomorrow we say, even in 2027, let Northeast produce the president, Ndume is not one of the first 10 people that can qualify.
All right, thank you so much. So why is your coalition finally got to close ranks? That's the leading story today on Leadership. Pressure mounts on coalitions to close ranks. There's been no really cohesion among the coalition party. We've been hearing about SDP. We also heard about ADC. What is actually happening? There have been meetings upon meetings, yet there have not been any clear-cut agreement as to who gets what.
Well, when you have an opponent that you think is formidable, you also want to play tantrums and play your cards. So I want to believe that they also want to do a lot of things in secrecy, because they feel that, look, you are facing a formidable opponent. If he knows your position and your plans ahead, he might be able to deploy the right strategy to confront it. Now, we always say this: what people understand, they can destroy. What people do not understand, they will get to criticize. So some of the statements we see or hear may not be the exact statistics or the right situation within the component. And of course, as for SDP or PDP, they have said, look, we don't think we are collapsing our structure into anybody. But if there are people who want to work with us, we are ready to work together. And so people should not expect what you had in 2013 that led to the formation of APC to happen. Now, you would always notice that from the back, there had always been some working relationship. The MPP had worked in the Second Republic with the MPF. The NCNC had worked in the First Republic with the MPC. But those are two parties that cannot merge because their position and instances were different. What you had expected to see in the First Republic possibly was an NCNC with a NEPU for joining force with Action Group to act against the MPC. But that was never what happened. It was that everybody went to the election alone, and then at the end of the election, NCNC and the MPC decides to join. The same thing happens in the Second Republic. You expected to have seen the PRP and the UPN and the MPP work with GNPP against MPF. But that was not the case. They ran the election alone, and after the election, MPP chose to form a form of alliance with MPL in government. Even though, yes, it's a presidential system, there was still some form of arrangement within that considered some position that MPP should ordinarily not have gotten in that government. So a lot of the establishment factor in Nigeria were always used to, let's have some form of alliance after election, right? And not so much of strength and build up before. Anything can still happen. 2027 is near and far.
Yes.
There still could be a new party. There could still be a new arrangement. But I also see that there are people who are in a hurry. And so those who are in a hurry want the alliance to tell them day-to-day happening on the inside. But I don't think that the alliance will be doing that. If they do that, they will be doing it at their own peril.
All right, thank you so much. Just before we go, the Sultan of Sokoto says give deputies free hand. He's telling governors. How feasible is that? Because when you give deputies free hand, I hope there will not be lapse.
No, give them free hand to do what? Practical reality should be that the law possibly defines the role of the vice president.
Yes.
Apart from deputizing for the president, he has responsibility for a lot of things within the economic space. He leads the national economic team and some other stuff like that. So what we should be advocating is not the governor, it's not the deputy governor being at the mercy of the governor to have a chance. It is going into the law and also assigning some responsibility at the state level to the governor. The vice president possibly sit over the National Economic Council, but it is the governors that attend, not even their deputy. Right? So what we should be driving towards is amend the laws, assign some responsibility to the deputy governors, rather than just making them election partner and spare tires.
All right. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. It's a Benedict Agunoye. My name is Winifred Igwebo, and it's sure very good to be hosting you on today's breakfast show. Don't forget, same time, same station. It's another opportunity for a fresh edition of the program. Don't forget to join us. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158.
Last word, leadership.